And I think that part of the problem is perhaps that people have very high expectations. Work like it all depends on you. Fast forward now 4 years, I'm now sat here in my own apartment that I bought with my own money. Hey guys, if you're part of the millennial generation or Generation Z, then buying a house might look like something that's not on the cards for the meantime for the various challenges that our generations are facing at the meantime. As a house is typically the biggest investment that you'll make over the course of your life, and the fact that it comes with a sense of security and stability and a place where you put down roots and call home, it can be really sad to think that it might not be a possibility for our generation. But as someone who once thought this wouldn't be possible, and now I have my own home that I bought by myself with my own money, I'm here to give you inspiration and encouragement in this video and to help you come about a way to make it happen for you. So let's get right into the video. Now I'm sure that you watching, like myself and probably many others, were told that once you finish your education, whether that's school, university, you go on to your first job, that we were gonna have a better quality of life than our parents. How that turned out to be false, huh? When our parents were younger, they typically had greater purchasing power. That means that their salaries, the money they had, went further. And why don't we have that same purchasing power? Well, because our cost of living has gone up at a greater rate than wages have gone up, and the price of houses have also gone up at a greater rate as well. So that means that our money can't buy as much as the same amount of money back in our parents' time would have bought as well. So with the cost of rent taking up a greater percentage of our salary, along with, basic necessities, everyday items that we buy to live and survive, that means that millennials and Gen Z saving rates are much, much lower than our parents' rates. And also access to credit to be able to buy a house, so to get a mortgage, there are a lot more stringent conditions involved compared to back when our parents' generations were buying their houses. And of course, if that wasn't enough, then there's all the economic side effects of the pandemic as well, such as job instability, higher inflation, and increasing interest rates as well. So with all of that said, how is it possible for millennials and Gen Z to go about buying a house? Spoiler alert, it's more mental than about actual money. So let's get into it right now. The first thing you need to do is arguably the hardest thing to do because it involves a big change in mindset. And you need to change your mindset to it being you're the only one that can do something about this for your situation. Now, that's not to say that any of the circumstances that I just outlined in the video intro are not valid at all. Of course, they make things incredibly difficult for our generation. But at the same time, putting the blame on other groups of people isn't going to help either, and nor should we expect any help in getting out of this ourselves. Now, talking from my own experience, as I left university, as I started my first job, I very much had this mindset of I'm never going to be able to buy a house until I'm married and until I buy with my future wife, because I simply thought that, I wouldn't have the financial capacity, I wouldn't be able to make it work on my own because of my circumstances. I thought, how am I going to save enough? House prices are too high. I don't earn enough. It's going to take forever for me to save. The banks will never give me a loan because my income's not high enough because I have UK student loan, etc., etc. And I very much blamed other groups of people. I blamed the government for the fact that I personally couldn't buy a house. And whether that's true or not, in no way were they going to change my situation. Were they going to fix my situation? Fast forward now 4 years from when I first thought like that, and I'm now sat here in my own apartment that I bought with my own money. Was it easy to get here? Not by any means. We'll talk a bit more about that a bit later in the video. But what did get me here, what was a real game changer and started me on that journey, was a shift in mentality. Once I changed my mindset from someone else needs to fix this to I need to fix this and I can fix this, that gives you a whole new perspective and it opens your eyes to new ways to make it happen. And you will make it happen if you really want to. Dave Ramsey, a personal finance educator in the US, the owner of Ramsey Solutions, him and his team conducted the largest survey of millionaires ever done. And what they found in their research was that 97% of the millionaires that they interviewed believed that they could become a millionaire. He often turns to a quote from Henry Ford, which is whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. So there you have it. Now, the second point I want to discuss is this the right financial decision for you? Now, from a general perspective, owning a home long-term is typically more cost efficient than renting because every mortgage payment goes to building equity in the home. And one day, in theory, your mortgage payments will stop and you will own that asset outright. Also, your home increases in value over time, so you you gain, you build your net worth through the increase in value of the home over the long term as well. That said, there's perhaps things that people don't take into account that are easy to forget, such as costs that come with buying the house, costs that come with selling it, any taxes that come from owning the property, from selling the property. Remember as well, you're the owner, so if there's any problems with the house, you're the one that needs to pay to fix it. You can't just call up a landlord and they'll come and fix it for you. That comes out of your pocket if you need to fix something in the house. And when we talk about making a profit on your house as well, that's not an overnight thing, unless you've been in the housing market the past year and you got really lucky. Because the housing market is an illiquid market. That means it takes months sometimes for changes to be reflected in the prices of houses. So really, for you to get a good ROI on your house, you're looking at probably a decade, if not decades, plural. So with that said, as was the case when I bought the house, I would consider buying, if I was planning on staying for somewhere, probably 5 to 10 years, because that would give me enough time to build up a fair amount of equity in the property. I wouldn't rely on the price going up of the house and making a profit on it, but if my mortgage payments were lower than rent, and then I factor in any other costs such as works on the house, closing costs, buying, selling costs, then perhaps that will save me money from a cash outflow perspective compared to paying rent. If you're not planning on staying in a place long term, then it might just be easier to rent. Point number 3, now we're getting onto the money stuff, so is your debt situation. Now this, for a lot of people, unless you're buying a property in cash, is probably going to be the biggest obstacle. So of course, we can look at this from the perspective of, I'm going to buy a house. What is my debt situation now? Do I have outstanding balance on my credit card? What is my credit score? But by that time, generally, if there's a problem, it's probably too late to fix it in time for making a purchase right then and there. Having your debt situation under control needs to start a long time before. That's developing good habits, not taking out credit cards that you don't need, that you're not going to pay off, not holding a balance on your credit card and building up interest so that you end up with a big pile of debt. Not buying an expensive car that has big repayments every month, because every debt payment that you have on a monthly basis, it eats away at your debt capacity, if you want to look at it in that sense. So it means that the amount of further debt that you can take on is going to be much less, which will make it challenging from a mortgage and financing perspective. So if you're watching this video and you're trying to buy a house right here, right now, and you have debt, really try and fix that debt situation as best you can, I would say, right now. If you're not looking to buy a house right now, then really develop the good habits right now so that you can have a good debt situation when the time comes to buy a property, when you're looking to buy a property. Because at the end of the day, yes, banks want to give out loans, they want to give out mortgages. That's their business. That's how they make money, essentially. But of course, since 2008, there's a lot of regulation that's come in place, which makes it more difficult. So you really need to present yourself as an attractive customer, as a secure person that the bank can look at and say, okay, we can loan money to this person and we're going to expect it back. We don't see any problems. Fourth point I want to talk about is saving, but not just saving, intentional saving. What's the difference here? Intentional saving means that you have a goal, there is something you're working towards. Because if you're saving money and there's no goal, there's nothing to work towards, then those savings will probably evaporate. You'll probably end up spending them on treats or holidays or whatever it is that you enjoy spending your money on. By setting a goal, maybe you set up a little savings pot in your bank account if that's something that they offer, then it gives you something focused to look at. And every time you look at that savings pot, you think, okay, I've made this much progress towards my goal. Obviously at the start, it's going to be slow. You're going to have to have that mental imagery in your mind that keeps you driven towards the end goal. But little by little, over the months, perhaps the years, depending on what your timeline for buying is, you'll see that pot growing steadily and surely, and you'll look and you'll see that you're making progress. And progress in itself is a really good motivator to keep going. So it can be challenging at the start, particularly when the progress isn't that visible. But trust me, if you keep in mind the end goal, then it makes it much easier to justify cutting back on certain expenses that you might otherwise just be happy to spend, whether it's, going out, or you might even postpone a holiday or a trip because you see that end goal in mind and it keeps you driven towards putting that money aside so that you can one day have your own home. Next point I want to talk about comes back to your mentality again, and it's to have realistic expectations. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, house prices have gone up over the years, of course, and so it means that what our parents perhaps bought for their first house is not something that we can have for our first house. And I think that part of the problem is perhaps that people have very high expectations for their first home. They want to buy their forever home as their first home. But in my opinion, and speaking from my experience, if you lower your expectations and go with what's been dubbed, I think in the US, as a starter home, whether it's a townhouse, whether it's an apartment, then that can be a way to just get on the property ladder. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like this apartment I'm in right now, it's by no means perfect. Like the apartment I lived in before in Madrid, it was actually much nicer. But this is my own apartment, and even though I don't expect to be in this apartment for the rest of my life, it's a comfortable place that I've made my own, and I'm happy living here for the time that I'm gonna be here. Simply put, I appreciate this apartment, I'm grateful that I have it, and I know that when the time comes, I can use the equity I have in this property when I sell it to leverage into my forever home, if the next home I buy is my forever home. Because being on the property ladder, whatever property you have, that makes it much easier to move up if that's your goal, to get that next home, to get the bigger home. Because let's say, for example, I sell this property, I don't know, 5 or 10 years after I bought it. So that's 5 or 10 years of equity that I've been building up in the property. Depending how the housing market's gone, might have gone up in value. Probably I'm gonna come out of this transaction with a greater amount of money than I put down when I bought the house. And I can then use that to leverage into the next property. And because I have a bigger deposit and I've perhaps been saving in the meantime as well to supplement that, that gives me that deposit, that leverage to go into a bigger property, to make a purchase of a big property if that's what I want at the time. So I think getting to the point where you have your forever home is a process. It starts with the mindset change that you can do it, you can get there. Then you need to set your goals, adjust your habits so that you can achieve your goals. Maybe start with a starter home. You don't have to start with the biggest and the best house on the market. You can get there, and then that will get you to a point where you have that leverage to be able to go and buy a bigger home at the end if that's what you want. And I'm gonna finish with a bonus point, guys, is take advantage of any help schemes that are available. Now, yes, I did say we shouldn't expect them to be there and we can't look for others to help fix our problems. But if they are there, then by all means take advantage of them. If there's a 95% mortgage scheme or a particular program that's helping young people buy their first home, by all means apply for it. Definitely take the help you can get, even though you shouldn't rely on it. Work like it all depends on you, but by all means take any help you can get. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you feel inspired and empowered to go out and buy your first home. Leave a comment and let me know if you've bought your first home already or if you're on the journey to doing it. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, I'll see you on the next one, guys, and let's get this money.